Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching from. And hello to the replay viewers, and hello, Gemma.
Hey,
What is going on today?
I'm trying to open that quietly and that didn't work. Sorry. Nothing much. All good. All good. All recovering.
Recovering well from the surgery, yes?
Yeah, unless I move, then you might hear me yelp, maybe. But other than that, we're good.
Yeah. And I'll make a little program note as well that my internet's been acting up. Well, there's nobody even here right now, so.
Yeah, my
Um,
internet's been great.
but yeah, you're going to take over. If I have to bounce out and reset graphics, all that jazz. But,
It wouldn't be Haps without technical issues.
well, that's any platform, I guess, or anything technology related.
Yeah.
Remember radical acceptance. So,
Oh,
speaking of today, we have a very great topic. Um, been trying to figure out how to tackle this one because it's a pretty big deal
mm-hmm.
in the mental health world. So, what I've decided to do. Hello, TJ. Welcome to the broadcast. Um, we're here today. We're going to talk about PTSD. What I've decided to do with this particular topic, since it is so broad and there's a lot to cover, different branches we can or different avenues we can go down. Um, we're going to start today. We're going to make it a multi-episode broadcast, but it's not going to be sequential. Like we'll do something different next week, and then maybe a month from now, or maybe a couple weeks, we'll do a part two, part three. I don't know how many it's going to take, but yeah. Hi, Retta. Welcome into the
Hey.
broadcast. Glad to have you here. So today we're just doing part one, and it's going to be kind of a introduction. What is PTSD? Um, how how do we uh, become diagnosed with it? Like, kind of just understanding a little bit of the basics here. So that being said, you know how I like to start. What do you know, Gemma? What do we know before we get into it?
Um, I know. Well, I have a diagnosis of PTSD. I've had it for quite many years now. Um, and they gave me mine because of a number of things that I'd been through, quite traumatic things, what with the rape and everything else. And because the symptoms, they said, surpassed 3 months, and it just like, I don't know, it triggered certain, I guess, behaviors off in me, and which is what we're going to see anyway. So that, yeah, it was hard to deal with,
So
but
triggers, and so you're coming from a sexual abuse standpoint, and that certainly has that's probably going to get its own episode, down the road,
yeah.
because there's definitely a lot to cover there as well. Not just the
Mm.
PTSD, but everything else that envelops you after something like a sexual trauma happens.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I believe we were talking earlier. Um, Rape PTSD, and I didn't know this. Um, you said it's classified as RPTSD or RTSD.
RTSD or something, yeah.
RTSD.
Yeah, there
Well,
we
I'll have to look more into that, and we'll definitely make an episode based on that alone, because I feel like we can fill up many an hour with information on that kind of stuff. Hello, Eleanor. Welcome in to the
go.
broadcast. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with a kind of a little bit of a rundown, give a little narrative on PTSD
Mhm.
as I understand it. Um, and I too was diagnosed with PTSD uh, from traumas based on the job and, in my personal life. There's no, it doesn't have to be, and that's one of the things we'll talk about. Hi, Lucia, welcome on in. It doesn't have to be just, solely for combat veterans. That's what we think of when we hear PTSD. We think of the combat veteran coming back stateside and dealing with his demons from what he saw in war. But this absolutely hits so many other people, and it doesn't discriminate, and it actually can develop early on in children as well, through abuse or etc. So, what is PTSD? We know it's post-traumatic stress disorder, but what does that mean? So, it's defined as a psychiatric disorder occurring in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event. And that's the base, down and dirty clinical definition for PTSD. If we dig a little deeper, like what classifies a traumatic event? That can be a number of things, obviously. It's any event involving experiencing or witnessing actual or threatened death, serious injury, significant loss, which we've talked about on this show before, or sexual violence has the potential for becoming PTSD down the road. So PTSD actually develops after the traumatic event, and it takes a little while. It doesn't just happen overnight. This is to come to a diagnosis of PTSD. You have to have 5 or 6 symptoms. We'll get into those later. For at least a month that it's interrupting your life and stuff like that. So, later on we'll get into signs and symptoms. I believe you have a list for us and stuff.
I do, yeah. Okay.
So we're talking about like serious car accidents that may or may not involve death. It doesn't have to involve death. It could be a near-death experience. You could have been in a car accident that involved a death, but obviously it wasn't you. Certainly there's military combat. We're not going to take it away from them. I didn't mean to sound like that. They're still very much in this realm. Physical, sexual assault, we've talked about briefly, and then anything like maybe a natural disaster, something that maybe uproots you from your house and home, or makes you feel less safe in your house and home. So I have PTSD from both sexual trauma, and I was at the Aurora movie theater when it got shot up. That event is what broke me. I had a complete mental breakdown about 5 months after the shooting. Wow. That is exactly what we're describing right here. So thank you for that comment. And please, if you want to comment further, feel free. Let us know what you did or where you went for help or anything like that. So back to what I was saying, the trauma is the traumatic event that you experience. You're not going to realize really that it's lingering with you all the time. It's not as easy as noticing, certainly some traumatic events based on the nature and how extreme they are will always linger no matter what. But some of the littler things, like maybe a bad call I ran, when we're on the scene of a bad car accident or something, we have a lot of adrenaline going. We know what our job is, we know what needs to be done, and we know how to do our job and you don't even really think about what you're seeing. So what happens is 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the road, when we're still thinking about that call and can remember every detail of that call, and certain smells, we can recount. If it was inside of a house, say, I can tell you exactly what the wallpaper looked like, and just describe it to a T.
Mm.
Whereas with other memories, we don't, we can't always do that. Like with the fond memories, we know what we did, we know when we did it, but we can't really bring it back into memory all the way like a traumatic event does. Um, and I've discussed it earlier on in some of the earlier broadcasts, and that's because the traumatic brain always keeps things in the now. It's always floating around up in your brain. It doesn't have anywhere to go. So it seems like it just happened yesterday, even though it was 10 years ago.
Mm.
Um, does that make sense so far?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
So trauma can resolve itself. Not everything is going to, become or head towards the PTSD thing. And certainly if you're proactive in the mental health field, like I like to think I am now, now that I know this information, I don't just let anything bottle up like that. I try not to get as in bad shape as I was, and I know how important it is to confront things if we run a bad call or something happens in my personal life that could be considered a traumatic event. I like to stay ahead of it and start talking it out with a counselor, um, group support, anything, even at an AA meeting, that counts as well. Like, and it kind of keeps you healthy. It kind of keeps those memories from heading down that road of PTSD.
Mm.
Um, Anything to add so far, Gemma?
No, you're covering it pretty well. Like I can relate with a lot of what you've said though. Certainly like with the memories and remembering some of the stuff. Like I can remember really fine details of the events of what happened to me, like really well. But then I have an issue remembering something that happened like 10 minutes ago. Like
Yeah,
just my brain, and they did say to me that a lot of that was down to the fact that I was trying to like kind of self-preservation, trying to stop those memories from continuing to hurt me, but it's pushed out the wrong ones basically. um but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I understand, and I can relate as well. So we'll talk further into this. We'll keep rolling with traumatic events because that's a
Mhm.
good basis. Trauma, and this I found this quote from a website called wellviewcounseling.com, and I'll probably be posting it on my channel page and social medias um, after the broadcast, because this was a very decent website of information when I was coming up with some talking points for tonight. I liked this quote: trauma, an event that exceeded your ability to handle or cope with the situation.
Mhm.
So, any event, uh, it could be anything. That's the key there. It doesn't have to be, you know, fiery death or anything like that. Any event that can exceed your ability to handle or cope with the situation.
And that's true because like just because somebody has been given a diagnosis of PTSD for something that happened to them, that doesn't necessarily mean that the next person is. Like everybody is different again when we're talking about this. So just because one person has it from a specific event or trauma doesn't mean that the next will.
Right. Um, so there's also complex traumas, which are traumas that occur repeatedly. I forgot to mention this a little earlier. And that might actually, I'm not 100% sure. Who was it that commented earlier? Was it Eleanor? Yes, Eleanor said PTSD C. Is that C for complex? Complex traumas are traumas that occur repeatedly. So we're talking about something like domestic violence, you know, a loved one, or I mean, a spouse that's beating you or verbally assaulting you every day. These repeated occurrences constitute as complex traumas. Yeah. So we'll find out actually while we're watching. We have a video, and I'm gonna look more into that PTSD as well. So for now, I would like to just kind of we're gonna pop off screen briefly, and we'll play a video for you that Gemma has found, and it's actually a very good. Maybe a better description, and we can talk about it more after we watch it. But we'll be right back on after the video.
Have you or someone you love ever been in a tornado or car accident, experienced sexual or physical abuse, served in a war zone? Most people have been through some kind of life-threatening or traumatic event, and it's common to have stress-related reactions after a trauma. But when symptoms last more than 3 months and they're not getting better, it's time to get help. Meet Sam. He recently returned from serving in Iraq. For many people, being in a crowded place like a baseball stadium or busy grocery store feels comfortable, but not for Sam. What should be a nice night out, taking his wife Tara to a restaurant, isn't fun for him anymore. He can only handle it if he sits with his back to the wall where he has a good view of the exits, and even then, he's too on edge to really enjoy it. At home, things aren't the way they used to be either. His sleep is restless at best, and some nights Tara isn't sure if Sam comes to bed at all. Sam seems to have a short fuse these days, and sometimes he snaps at Tara over tiny misunderstandings. What he and Tara never talk about is the trauma he experienced when he was deployed. He's never mentioned the guilt, the weight he carries around, wishing he could have done more to prevent what happened. Instead, he's turned inward, pulling away from family and friends. Tara tried to give him some space, but after months passing without change, she really started to worry. She was the one to finally say what they were both thinking. It's time to get help. That's when Sam finally decided to take action. He reached out to a doctor who told him about PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Sam's symptoms were getting in the way of enjoying his life. Re-experiencing, hyperarousal, feeling worse about yourself or the world, and avoidance are the 4 types of symptoms people with PTSD have. Sam's doctor explained each. The first is reliving the event, or re-experiencing. This is often an unwanted memory or even a flashback where you feel like you're right back in the situation again. Seeing, hearing, or even smelling something that reminds you of the trauma can trigger these. Nightmares where you relive parts of the event in your sleep are common too. The second is avoidance. Staying away from situations that remind you of the trauma. That's why Sam tries to avoid thinking about painful memories altogether. He pours himself into his work or uses alcohol to keep his mind from going back to the trauma. The third is feeling worse about yourself or the world since the trauma. You might feel overwhelming guilt like Sam or not trust anyone. You just might not be able to feel happy, even when you are around people you love. The fourth type of symptom is sudden rushes of anger, irritability, feeling jittery, always on alert, always on the lookout for danger. This is called hyperarousal, and loud noises or a driver cutting in front of you can be all it takes to set you off. If you recognize any of these symptoms of PTSD in yourself or someone you love, don't wait. See your doctor to find out if it could be PTSD. Just like Sam and Tara found, there is hope. You don't have to live with the symptoms of PTSD forever. Effective treatments are available.
All right. That was a very informational video. And thank you for finding that. Thank you for tagging the folks that were responsible for making it as well. Um, so with that information and kind of breaking down this PTSD and understanding how we come about with the diagnosis, let's get into the signs and symptoms of it. If you want
Yeah.
to take a look at your list and start
Yeah.
reading some, we'll stop and break some of them down if
Yeah.
need be.
Okay, so we've mentioned the first one quite a bit with the intrusive thoughts. And it says that it's the best known symptom of PTSD, and constantly being disturbed by the unwanted, unwelcome, distressing memories of what happened to them. With giving the examples of like car accident or traumatic events, things like that. Um, and that can go on to being the second one, which is nightmares. It can get in the way of your sleep. Nightmares. I certainly suffered from a lot of nightmares.
Absolutely.
Um, Avoiding reminders of the event. So it can be like avoiding going to a certain place or avoiding certain things. A lot of my PTSD stem from multiple different things, to be honest. Like with the rape and the sexual abuse, the years of sexual assaults, and then being in a relationship that was had a lot of domestic violence.
And
Those
yeah,
things, but certainly with for me with avoiding reminders of the event, I completely stopped going to a certain place, and it was totally it totally ruined my life where I couldn't go to a certain place. I completely avoided such a huge part of where I live because I couldn't bear to go there. Um,
yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about avoidance because
mm,
and going over the stuff and the signs and symptoms. I mean, intrusive thoughts. Certainly, that's one of the probably the starting points of noticing something's wrong.
mm,
That you're constantly being bugged by you're constantly going back to these thoughts that just insert themselves into your life um, out of nowhere sometimes. But the avoidance, I feel like almost everybody can relate with. Um, what do we do when something is not going our way, or we're not happy with certain folks, etc.? It doesn't even have to be about PTSD. We
mm,
naturally try and avoid the situation in the future, so we don't have to, um, deal with it. We don't have to deal with confrontation. We don't have to deal with embarrassment, maybe, um, and all that comes with it.
mm.
Avoidance is certainly, I mean, we see it a lot in almost every um, field of the mental health realm here, but
Mm.
it certainly is a big one for PTSD
Oh
because
yeah.
we don't want to deal with what's going on. And what do we
Mm,
do when we avoid? We wind up isolating,
mhm.
which is not good. We detach from society, we detach from the world, our family,
Oh
um,
yeah, yeah, definitely.
and then if you're so inclined or wander down this road like I did, then you start abusing a substance like alcohol.
Hmm.
Uh, just substance abuse is nothing more than avoidance. You know, uh, I'm basically I'm basically getting drunk so I can avoid having to deal
Mm.
with any of this. You know,
Yeah.
uh, TJ mentioned EMDR. I don't know, Gemma, if you know what EMDR is.
Um, I'm gonna look up the thing just to make sure I need to
It's
check it's not
it,
something of a different name here.
it's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. I
Oh
stumbled
no.
over the I stumbled over the D, but I was offered. I'm sorry, I wasn't offered EMDR down at my rehab center, but it was available to you if you met the criteria. So my PTSD issues, it wasn't warranted in my case, but I heard
Mm.
nothing but great things about EMDR, and it allows you. What they did down there is they had a light bar that would, you would watch the light go back and forth,
Mm.
and you did this the entire time you were talking with one on one with the um, counselor. And however it works, how the brain is a mysterious being, but it allows you to. I don't want to call it hypnotizing, but you go
Mm.
deeper into your own subconscious, and next thing you know, you're bringing out uh, more than you were even aware of, per se, in this counseling session. I've seen
Mm.
people come out of EMDR like dizzy, need to sit down, flush, you know, look
Mm.
look like they've just been through the ringer. Um, but EMDR is a great tool, and we might, we might do an episode on that down the road.
Yeah, that was never
It's
something I was offered, so.
Yeah, um, but yeah, avoidance,
Mm.
huge, huge.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I can't believe when I was reading that you only need one marker of avoidance, because I feel like most people could pretty much hit all of
Mm.
the three or four of them that I read. But we'll get into that down a little later. You can
Yeah.
continue on if you'd like.
Yeah, with the avoidance thing, I did also stop going out and I became a complete recluse for a long, long time. And just a quick thing, just to touch on a couple of things that people have said really quickly with this. I was
Mm-hmm.
told in a way to get out of the house again to picture, like, think about myself fulfilling one of those tasks. So, say if TJ, you said you are agoraphobic now, if you can think of yourself going out of the house and going just to somewhere really close to you and picture in your mind what that would be like as though you're watching it on a movie, and picture it, think about all the things, what you're going to wear, what happens, you're going to go out the house, you're going to open the door, unlock the door, lock the door, go what you're going to go past, and you have to think about absolutely everything that you're going to do, everything that you're going to pass, and think, right, okay, and how am I feeling at this moment, how am I feeling as me sat in this house thinking about it, and as me looking at this person doing this. And that actually got me to go out again. I think I was stuck, it was before Thomas was born, and I spent, I think it was about 8 months without going out a single time. I did not leave the house at all. And some of that was down to like the fact that I was controlled as well at first, and that stopped me going out. But then it did become a complete, like, I was terrified to leave the house. Anyway, back on to the symptoms. If anybody wants to message me about that, I can help with, like, go through that. Or I actually have a script of what I had to go through with that as well, what I was sent from my counselor.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, and if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We could stop like at any
yeah,
time and take some questions as well. Go ahead,
yeah, yeah.
Gemma.
Right. Did we do memory loss? Yeah, memory loss. That's a big one. Funny that I forgot that I'd not done memory loss. Oh gosh, the irony.
The
Yeah,
irony.
memory loss. Like, that's huge for me. My memory is terrible, and it does say about traumatic events impacting the brain's functioning. So it's not always the traumatic event that you forget. Usually, it isn't the traumatic event that you forget. It's other things. It can be little things, or it can be important things. Like, I've forgotten that I've had appointments. I'm sure Haps can vouch for that. Twice.
Twice.
Twice. Oh dear. And then I've forgotten, like, even down to things like, did I forget to take my tablets? Have I forgotten to eat? I couldn't remember. Like, I genuinely couldn't remember if I'd eaten and drank things. It got that bad. Then the next one, negative thoughts about yourself and the world. Um, I can relate with that as well because I also have body dysmorphia that came around the same time.
Hmm.
Then there's self isolation and feeling distant. So that's like to cut yourself off from other people, not necessarily just going out and about, but cutting yourself off from talking to other people. So like on the phone, social media, whatever, just completely cutting yourself off from others.
More avoidance.
Yeah. Anger and irritability. Um, It says that the PTSD creates a state of hyperarousal. This means that the brain is kicked into a stage of fight or flight. At the slightest urging, hyperarousal results in strong emotions like anger, as well as a general irritability on a day to day basis. Now, I was told that that was some of that came about because the things that happened to you, like you mentioned, were beyond your control. So sometimes with the slightest thing, it's a way of kind of like, for me anyway, it was like I could either react by completely losing myself and breaking down, or absolutely blowing my top sometimes and losing my shit, so to speak, and just getting really cross. And I did often. I would get really quite angry and irritable because it was a sense of, I don't know, kind of a way of a sense of control, as like, if I don't do this, I will absolutely lose it and break down and cry. And I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to feel like that.
Yeah. And let's talk further a little bit on the irritability.
Mm-hmm.
That was 100% me. Now, the drinking obviously just fueled that. Uh, but there was a certain, uh, I guess, in my depression and everything. Obviously, I at the time I didn't know what exactly was going on. I just thought that this was normal life, and I was dealing with it in my own way, which wasn't healthy. However, it had made me so much more irritable. My wife has told me today, now that I've worked a program, and I've gone to rehab where I worked on some anger management as well. But just taking uh, the substance, the alcohol, out of my life alone has made me so much more calmer. The alcohol literally fueled my irritability and everything that happened around the house. Like I told you earlier, that I had to fix our upstairs toilet because the tank was leaking. That would have sent me through the roof. The day would be ruined.
Mm-hmm.
I probably wouldn't even get around to doing it out of spite till 3 or 4 days later. And, it would turn into a whole big mess that it didn't need to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and now, my wife has said, you are so much calmer. You're calmer with the kids. You're calmer with me. Um, you're calmer with your family. I mean, you just totally see a difference. And so
Mm-hmm.
that irritability really does drag you down. It's more and more of increasing that negativity
Mm-hmm.
in your life, which when you increase that negativity, you increase the avoidance and the
Mm-hmm.
isolation and the detaching.
They all
Uh,
seem to fall into a circle with each other. So you do more of one, and then the rest just follow.
Absolutely.
Like I never forget, a few months ago now, and I'd been bringing the washing in and took the rubbish out, and I dropped. I think it was the clothes pegs. I dropped just a couple of clothes pegs on the floor, and that was it. I completely just, the whole washing went on the floor. Whoops, don't do that. The pegs, everything, me went on the floor. It was just like, oh, you'd think a complete disaster had happened. And in the end, from just dropping those 2 pegs, I ended up having to rewash the whole thing because it all went on the floor. And it was like, I can't even remember why I did it or what. I think it was just a build-up of everything that just like, phew. Because at
Yeah.
one point I was trying to hold it in rather than work on it. I was trying to hold it in and bottle it in rather than working on it, and it just erupted.
Yes, I understand exactly.
Mhm.
It was exactly the same with me.
Yeah.
And just real quick, going back to Eleanor here, saying that, I mean, she's kind of confirming what I was talking about. You know, she was using opioids uh, as a numbing agent, a distraction,
Mm.
and not knowing at the end here, she says, not knowing I was only making it 1,000 times worse over time. And that's the key there, that understanding
Mhm.
that, coming to terms with that sentence that she just said is where you're going to start making a lot of progress as far as
Mhm.
substance abuse goes. Not everybody falls in the realm of substance abuse, but
Mhm.
certainly those that have, if you can understand that you're making things just 1,000 times worse. I mean, alcohol is called a depressant for a reason.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
not. It may feel good in the moment, like you're cheering yourself up, maybe, but
Mm.
the long term effects of it are only just negative.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to touch on that real quick. Thank you, Eleanor.
Yeah, that's fine. Like even with myself, I'm prescribed opiates for pain relief, but I was absolutely at one point abusing that. Um, with the fact that because of how I felt like I was in more pain as well. So it did have a knock on effect with my pain. So I was taking more to space me out basically. And I would take fentanyl and morphine on top, and I was taking more and more and more of that to the point where now I've got such a strong threshold where the amount that I need to get past the pain threshold is just ridiculous.
Mhm. Certainly.
And I know I'm addicted. But I'm on it for pain relief. But oh,
That's the problem with prescription opiates.
mm,
It does, just because it's prescribed doesn't take away the fact that it's
yeah,
still heroin
oh,
or fentanyl, etc.
mm, the side effects of it is just horrific. But anyway, we'll get back onto the list. um, right. So reduced interest in favorite activities. Um, Negative life events make it difficult to enjoy once loved activities. The mood changes and sleeplessness and avoidance associated with PTSD means that a person might feel unmotivated and uninterested in their work and hobbies. So that was certainly definitely something that I did. I gave everything up at one point.
Just lost interest in everything.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
literally just wanted to sleep. All I wanted to do was sleep.
and while we're reading over some of these, the categories and the signs and symptoms, um, we do have, or Gemma found an online test that
Mm,
anybody is welcome to take. We're going to both post it on our pages and our socials. The
mm-hmm,
link for the test. It's a pretty decent one. I looked at it. She sent it over to me,
yeah.
and you can. It's a self diagnostic tool per se. It's not a legitimate. I just went to a psychiatrist and was diagnosed with
It gives you
PTSD
an
because
idea. Mm,
exactly it kind of points you in the direction of maybe we should go visit a psychiatrist or
yeah, yeah,
something along those lines. But
yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to throw
Still need
that
a
out there.
formal diagnosis, but yeah, it gives you an idea so that you can go and obtain that diagnosis.
So the constant irritability, always on edge,
Mm,
jumpy, uh, uh, easily startled, and the sleep disturbances. Waking up in the middle of the night with the night terrors, as somebody mentioned earlier. It's not just nightmares; it's night terrors, like
Yeah.
legitimate wake up in a cold sweat. This is real life, or it felt like real life. How a dream can sometimes feel so real. Um,
And that
these are
affect kids as well, because I remember Thomas going through night terrors after I'd split up with my ex, his father. Um, for months and months, he went through some serious night terrors, and it was horrible to watch. He doesn't remember them because with mostly night terrors, apparently you don't remember them, but they
right.
were very violent, very, very horrible to watch. And
You can,
at the time, he was what? He was 2, 3. So that
yeah,
that was horrific.
you can. I've seen videos, documented sleep studies with night terrors, and the people just wake up in a full-on blood-curdling scream.
Yeah, I've had a sleep study actually. That was
So
interesting.
I did one once, but that was for apnea. But was that
Mm.
all on your list? Did you have any further signs,
They said
symptoms?
like hypervigilance, but that was in the same thing about being like jumpy, extreme state of awareness,
Yes.
difficult concentrating,
So
insomnia.
hypervigilance. Um, we saw this word a lot when I was down at the center, and we would do our daily check-ins. That was always on there. Do you feel hypervigilant? And I finally, after a couple of days, I'm like, what the hell does this mean? Hypervigilant. And they explained it to me. You're just overly aware of your surroundings. You're on edge. Basically, you're completely. You're not like in tune with everything, but you notice and hear and smell everything that's going on around you to a higher degree, almost as if you're worried something's going to happen, or. So that showing up on these daily check-ins all the time, I started thinking to myself, wow, I wonder, I can sometimes come across, I guess, as a little hyper vigilant, but that's just the firefighter job in me. Like I take my family to a restaurant to have a nice dinner or whatever. The first thing I'm doing is looking for all the exits. What if something, bad were to happen in here? What if there's a fire? What if there's gunfire? Who knows? Um, where am I going? What's my plan of attack? And that's always almost the first thing I'm looking at any new place.
Mm.
But Bo,
Um,
Bo, you had a nice compliment up there earlier.
there's another one here that's on this list that we didn't mention: casting blame, trying to blame other
Oh,
people
sure.
or blaming themselves.
Yeah. Nothing is ever anybody's fault.
Yeah, this is quite a list actually, because like some of them I wouldn't have thought of, but yeah, like risky behaviors. I did a lot of that. I was
Yeah.
terrible for that.
Yeah.
Like I started with the whole. It started with the whole with the knife thing, where I would
Hmm.
just tempt fate, to taking things I knew I shouldn't. Then putting music on. I'd go for a walk, put music on, and I would just walk into the road and not even look and think if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and
Yep.
literally just go for it.
Yep. That was another one along with hypervigilance that would always come up is the risky behaviors.
Mm.
Uh, what they're looking for there. Obviously, it's a PTSD sign and symptom, uh, but
Excuse me.
it's also a part of. There's the cat. It's also a part of something called passive death wish.
Mm.
The risky behaviors um, kind of show the depression side of things as well. How depressed you are. Passive
Mm.
death wish. You're not going to actively kill yourself, but you're not going to stop any you're not going to stop fate from happening. And in fact, maybe
Yeah.
you'll help fate along a little bit by going skydiving or something like that. So
Yeah.
definitely in the PTSD world
Hmm. I
is
can
the
relate
risky
with that.
behaviors.
Because when I was discovered to be self-harming and cutting myself and taking overdoses and stuff, I thought, okay, well, you know, and that's when that came on more, because I'm like, well, okay, if people are going to say that, then maybe if like it's meant to be. And I tried to help it on now, because I have a physical disability. I couldn't do any of the extreme like sports or anything like that, but certainly like walking out into a busy road without even looking, or um, going to places that I knew were dangerous. And then I even started going into abandoned buildings and things, doing all sorts of stuff that I knew was potentially dangerous for me. Just thinking, well, who am I to say what happens to me if something happens,
Yep, passive death wish. I didn't
Yeah.
know that was a thing. So this is more of that, you know, just
This is a
shining
really
through.
good website as well. It was on the thing. It's Cumberland Heights, and then there's Mind, which is a UK thing, but
If
some really good
if you're
things on
able
here.
to, can you just share it in the comments? Obviously, we can post it on our
Yeah, yeah,
pages as well. But if you have it readily available to,
yeah. I'm
um,
just the cat. This is what you call defiance.
the
He's just
cat.
headbutted the door open and let himself in.
So Eleanor hit on another a good talking point from a
Mm.
previous broadcast. I was reading her comment, and at the end there, um, you jump into overdrive because uh, it thinks it's what already happened is going to happen again. And what is that? That's a cognitive distortion. Um,
Mm.
all we
Hey,
know,
Michael.
hey, Michael, welcome on into the broadcast. All we know uh, is what we've lived through, right? So
Mm.
we start this fortune telling, which is a cognitive distortion. Fortune telling being obviously predicting the future
Mm.
based on what we have lived through. And we got to get out of that mind frame because
Mm.
you can't tell the future. Just because it happened once doesn't mean it's going to happen again. But our bodies are almost, or our brains are almost hardwired to live off of experience, you know. Um,
Yeah.
we can jump back to intrusive thoughts for a moment. Um, uh, the flashbacks, those are in particular, these are the ones that the combat veterans, I mean, when you paint a picture of PTSD, I feel like that combat veteran that just got home from war is the first thing that comes to mind. And these flashbacks that are so real to them and to anyone. I never personally experienced any flashbacks. Mine are more along the lines of just a vivid memory of what, like maybe a bad call I ran. I can literally tell you all of the five senses of what was going on that day 10 years ago. But I never had any negative flashbacks like that. But these folks, they'll go to the mall and they'll be walking in the store shopping with their wife, and maybe a noise or something triggers this event. This flashback starts happening. All of a sudden,
Mm.
they're diving behind the clothing rack like they're taking gunfire, and they're in the trenches again, the foxhole. Um,
Mm.
Bo might Bo might know a little something about that. Uh, Actually, he said he was out there causing trouble, not uh, taking any of it. The
But
nightmares. Well, he was out there on the front. He can explain it to you better. I don't. I don't know the life of a frog man. Uh, Nightmares, we'll go back to as well. So we talked about the night terrors, nightmares, night sweats, all these. These are all, I'm sorry, these are all intrusive thoughts that qualify you for a PTSD diagnosis. Now, it should be important. I don't think we've mentioned it yet. Did you have anywhere? I never wrote it down, but you have to, all these categories, the intrusive thoughts, the avoidance of triggers, avoidance in general, alterations in your cognition and mood. So the negative thoughts, the amnesia, or not remembering, PTSD brain as it's more commonly known, or the alterations in arousal and reactivity. That's your anger. So this is the four categories. You have to have, I believe it's one of the intrusion symptoms. You need to have one of the avoidance symptoms. You need to have two of the alterations in cognition and mood, and you need to have two of the alterations in arousal and reactivity. So all those, so that's six total. One from each, at least one from each category, two from the last two. And you need to have those for a solid month at least of daily interruption to your day to be diagnosed with PTSD. There's Bo. We were the most dangerous entities operating outside the wire. See, that's what I'm saying. He was out there slinging the gunfire, not taking it.
Yeah. With the like to the nightmares and stuff, when I had to have I've had sleep studies for two reasons, sleep apnea being one, and then because for a long time I was going to sleep having no recollection of it, but waking up with like bloody nose and bust lips, black eyes, clumps of hair in my hand, and I had no recollection of why. And I was going to sleep and reliving some of what was happening to me with the abuse, but doing it myself, physically doing it and beating myself up in my sleep, and then waking up having no recollection of done it, but just the fact that I was all beaten and bloody. So I ended up having to have a sleep study for that and be wired up. And I think one of those entailed having to go and sleep in a hospital, literally so that everybody could see you.
Yeah.
And that was not very pleasant, but it certainly alerted me to what was going on. And every so often, even now, I have something on my phone that records what's going on just in case I do happen to have that happen to me, because a couple of times I've had just something that has triggered a memory or something, and I'm still not like fully like over. I don't think you ever just get over it and it's never there. I think it's always in the back burner. But certainly you can get to the point where you can live a normal life and it doesn't interrupt you and things, but sometimes something can come back and trigger just a memory. It's just how well you can deal with that. And I'm not at the stage yet where depending on what it is, where I've completely gotten over certain things, and it can trigger enough to me to think, and just to not to act on it or anything, but just to affect my train of thoughts and stuff.
It interrupts your day,
Mm.
And that's what it's talking about. You have to have this daily interruption for a solid month with six of these signs and symptoms off of a pretty long list, to be honest. It's that's how you qualify for a PTSD diagnosis. But like I said, we'll put that test that you found. We'll load that up onto our channel pages. I'll send it out on Twitter. I don't have the Facebook, but Gemma does, so keep an eye out over there.
Yeah.
As well, and feel free, please, take 5-10 minutes and fill this out. And I mean, obviously, if you already have a PTSD diagnosis, but it could still be Interesting. I just took a depression inventory 2 or 3 days ago. The same one I took down at the center that came back with results of having extreme depression. I took the very same test or inventory of myself, and I wound up with a score that it was worlds better. I was classified with mild mood disturbance. That's it. So I jumped up like 4 categories on the list. But
That's amazing.
it's never a bad thing to go back and retake these tests or whatever, and just check in with yourself and see how you're getting along. Tim isn't allowed on Facebook. No, I 100% took myself off of Facebook because of triggers, and Facebook went the way of the wind with me because back when I initially got divorced and I was in my most depressed state. I mean, this was the most depressed I was and didn't know how to deal with. So, again, the drinking intensified, the negative intensified, the avoidance intensified, the isolation intensified. And to be in that state and then get on Facebook and see literally your entire feed just filled with everybody's wonderful lives and exactly where you should be right now, but have
social media is horrible for that.
It was literally doom scrolling for me. And I was going into a much darker place, so I just said, I need to get off of this. It is not healthy for me. And, maybe today I'm in a better place that I could be on Facebook. But yeah, at the same time, I don't know. I just don't like the thought of it still. Maybe it's a trigger thing. I don't know. But that's my story on Facebook, in case anybody was wondering.
It is, though. Social media can be really, really damning to your health. I found it really didn't help me. And then certainly with lockdown as well, watching Facebook, and then with everything else as well, with the body dysmorphia and seeing people posting these wonderful photos and stuff about how they were married, they had the perfect life. I mean, you're not going to post something on Facebook or wherever else if you've got all sorts. Like, my house is completely upside down. I'm not going to post a picture of that right now, and I'm not going to post a picture of how I look right now, because I literally had to make myself look like I hadn't been dragged through a hedge backwards, acceptable for this. But people only put on what they want you to see, and I had to really, really try and remember that. But there are times where I will take myself off social media, even recently, because I'm like, no, I know I can't deal with that right now, so let it go.
Yeah, if you're in a state of heavy depression, or you haven't processed traumas properly, which I had no idea about, back when this was happening. If you're in that state, then it really is doom scrolling. Like, your social media is not going to be anything that is helpful or probably what it's meant for. It's not healthy, and that is I just got rid of it, and I haven't looked back. I'm slowly getting back on all the other, like, I never deleted my Twitter, but I've never really hardly used it. And Twitter, I think, it's a little different. Like, you kind of control what you see by who you follow. Like, if you want to know about what's going on in the Olympics or the NFL, you can only follow that, and not follow anybody else that's a negative part of your life. So we are at the hour mark. This was a informative hour. Part one, like I said. We have now tackled the diagnosis, what it takes to get the diagnosis, and kind of warning signs and what is PTSD. That's what we have covered tonight. If you jumped in late, feel more than free to watch the replay. Gemma and I are gonna try and figure something out where we can get all of our episodes on one page together, so we don't constantly have to sift for them. Even if you go to my channel where we broadcast from, there's still a whole mess of other stuff on there that isn't Mental Health Hour only.
Yeah.
So
we're a Facebook page, so I'm going to upload them all onto there.
Okay. Yeah.
Hopefully, maybe a Twitter one as well or something. But I'm figuring something out.
So they'll all be on Facebook, so you guys can watch the replays, and I can't. So just a quick recap before we head out for the night. Thanks, Bo. Bo blocked me. That's probably because I ignore him all the time.
Hey, you even blocked me last week.
Yeah, I still don't know how that happened. I sent Gemma a picture of it, and I was like, "Look at this, you're blocked." I did not do this though. So real quick, we're going to go over what we discussed, a little recap. What is PTSD? PTSD is a psychiatric disorder occurring in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event. What's a traumatic event? Any event involving experience or witnessing actual or threatened death, serious injury, significant loss, sexual violence, domestic abuse, etc. So we're talking your serious car accidents, we're talking the physical and sexual assault, natural disasters that can uproot you from your home. And the quote of the evening for me was, trauma is an event that exceeds your ability to handle or cope with the situation. That was from wellviewcounseling.com. I'm definitely going to be posting on my page a link to their website for PTSD information, because it was a very good one. Complex traumas are repeated traumas like domestic violence. These cause that fight or flight. The PTSD signs and symptoms cause that. We didn't even mention that, but fight or flight reaction is going to be an episode all on its own. The PTSD triggers can and usually do put the body in a fight or flight state. This is completely normal. It's a part of everybody's inner workings.
You mentioned fight or flight when I was talking about.
You did get it? Okay. Yeah. All right.
Very slightly, but that's a huge thing though. So.
And then finally, the signs and symptoms. We went over the 4 categories of PTSD symptoms, which were intrusive thoughts, avoidance, which is avoiding reminders, triggers, not going to certain places, not being around certain people because they're all negative triggers or reminders. Then you had the alterations in cognition and mood, which is your negative thoughts and also your forgetfulness, your amnesia symptoms. And then lastly, the last category was alterations in arousal and reactivity. This is the constant irritability. This is the always on edge and disturbance to your sleep schedule. And that was so, and remember you needed one of each of the first 2. So 1 symptom out of there and 2 symptoms out of the last 2 for a solid month of daily interruption to your life to qualify for a diagnosis of PTSD. I think that handles it. I think that covers everything.
It's certainly quite difficult to get a diagnosis at times. Like definitely over here. Like I think I had to go 3 times to qualify eventually, and I'd been having symptoms for over 3 months before they diagnosed me here. But I guess it's different from place to place.
Absolutely. And it all depends. Yeah, it depends on your doctor your psychiatrist, because what he considers an intrusive thought might not be what you consider, or vice versa.
Yeah.
It's all in how it's looked at. Definitely, it's all relative. But that goes back to what I've mentioned before. You can always shop around with your doctors. You're the one paying money for these doctors. Make them work for you. And by make them work for you, I mean work for you in the sense that it's a good working relationship between the two of you. The same with the counselors. You need to be on a certain level with your counselor. If you're going to a counselor for 3 weeks and you're not getting anything out of it, you're not with the right counselor. 100%. I speak from experience. There was plenty of counseling before I went to rehab. I had some counseling sessions, and there was just no connection at all. And I guess it didn't help also that I probably didn't want to be there. But what you do from
right frame of mind, I guess,
and what you do from here with this diagnosis. Now that we know about this, we'll start. We'll be talking about something else next week. But when we revisit PTSD, we'll probably start getting into how to handle this diagnosis and manage it. Because there's plenty that can be done. Maybe you get yourself a little bunny light, grounding techniques, all kinds of healthy ways to manage a PTSD diagnosis that does not involve spending your life at a bar or isolating yourself away, detaching, and not going out into the world. As somebody mentioned earlier, being agoraphobic, just not leaving your house. That's a real life thing, and it's unfortunately it's what happens when it's not managed properly. So that is all I have. Gemma, did you have any closing statements, comments, concerns?
Not really. One only little thing I have. I've actually made. I haven't uploaded them yet, but I've made a few things to put on YouTube to help with certain things because I was given these tools and I've used them as well to help me. So I've uploaded them, or will be uploading them soon to YouTube. One of them is to help with getting out of the house and things like that. So when I have done it, I will post them. But yeah, it's certainly been a very interesting broadcast, and PTSD definitely isn't one you can just do in an hour.
Right. This is we're going to talk further about this in the coming months. Hi, Blaine. Welcome in. We're just getting ready to jump off, but I encourage you to watch the replay. Good information tonight. And we are going to continue on PTSD sometime down the road. All right. That being said, Gemma, it was an absolute pleasure again. And we will be back next week, Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Gemma time, 3 p.m. Bow time. Everybody's on. And I can't leave out Blaine. That'll be 4 p.m. Mountain time. Right? Yeah, 4 p.m. Mountain time.
I don't know. Time zones suck.
Everybody's on a different. I haven't dealt with time zones this much since I got on this platform. So, all right, Gemma, we will talk again next week. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thanks for the award. And we can't wait to see you again. Bye for now.
Bye.
Oh,
Get there in the end.